Record.
Okay, so it's 10 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. Really quickly, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Charlene. I am the FM at Songpa branch, and then also I am a certified trainer. So I'll be running the training today, but all of this information comes from the content team. So there are a few members of the content team here as well. A few things to keep in mind. We will be doing the workshop and then we'll follow with a Q&A session. So if you have any questions at the end of the session, you can go ahead and ask those and we'll try and answer as many as possible. Before leaving today, you must complete the survey. So I will send that at the end of the actual workshop before we begin the Q&A. That way, if there's any like April instructors or anything that need to head out due to the timing, obviously it's best if you can stay for the Q&A session, but the biggest thing is making sure that you fill out that survey before you head out. So I'll send that right at the end of the workshop. As I mentioned, there's a lot of new information today, so taking notes is going to be really important just so that you can deliver this to your instructors and make sure that we are making the most of this new program. There's been some confusion, I think, with what organic learning is and whether it's replacing in C2 or if it's being added on. So we're going to hope to clarify that and then explain the methodology and everything like that for today. So what is organic learning? This is to strengthen students' writing and speaking abilities through in-class teacher guidance. So there's going to be a C2 aspect, then also a V1 aspect. As instructors, I'm sure everyone can relate, we really focus on reading and listening skills, and then the writing and speaking components kind of get pushed off to the end. And it's one of those things where, well, it's best if you get to it, but if you don't get to it, like just try and cover it quickly. And a lot of times it just doesn't get the attention that it needs. And so we see that students' reading and listening abilities are improving, but their writing and speaking doesn't improve at the same rate. So hopefully, if we can help them with this organic learning process, then we'll see those writing and speaking abilities improve as well. This was something that content team also saw through the pilot that they did. I believe last term they piloted this, or 2 terms ago, and it was to try and see if this actually has an impact on the iLearning scores and just the way that they're able to improve. And there was a positive result. So that's why we're going to be rolling it out to all locations. So organic learning is basically the students do part at home, and then they do part in class, and then they do part, they finish it back at home. So this is all around their learning portal and iLearning. It's basically more process-based rather than just a focus on output. Why are we doing that? It's to improve student writing and speaking quality. So with C2, the focus is personalizing. So adding relevant personal experience to strengthen their opinion. So this is going to be the main focus, is that students might not know how to personalize, especially your low level, so EC4, Mega, Giga. So it's really about helping them understand how personal experience can actually help strengthen their writing. And then V1, there will be obviously a separate workshop for this at the end of the spring term, and that will introduce the V1 story writing component heading into summer term. But today we're just going to focus on C2. Additionally, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this as well, where students are relying on outside sources to complete their writing assignments or to do their speeches for like speaking practice. So essentially, we see students using like ChatGPT or things like that because they're given a prompt and then they just input that prompt and then they get an answer. So through doing this, because they have to do such small steps one at a time, we're hoping that one, they don't feel overwhelmed. So it's just more digestible for them. It builds their confidence in doing the process. It also obviously improves their skills. And then it also discourages them from using any sort of outside source. So what teachers need to do differently, they need to understand the iLearning prompt for perspective speech and story writing. So one thing that's super, super important that you need to stress to your instructors is that they have to prepare for this with the same diligence that they are preparing their lessons. So the perspective speech is going to be built into the first hour of C2 lessons. So for all low-level weeks, it's going to be in the first hour. For all high levels, it's going to be in the first hour. The only exception is mid-levels will do alternating weeks. So they'll still do the newscast, which is just changing slightly, and I'll go over that. And then they'll do perspective speech in the even weeks. So again, that's the only exception. Otherwise, this is going to be something that instructors are doing every week and really need to make sure that they are familiar with it and giving the same attention to this that they are the material from the original C2 lessons. This will all be reflected in the segment guides. Those will be available. They're available on ERP now. And I believe they'll be available on FTP a little bit later, so maybe next week or the week after. But they are available on ERP right now, so those should be accessible. And then the time allocations and all of the different methodologies that have been shifted will be on those segment guides. Big changes for spring term. One is that there's no more career note. So I'm not sure how many locations are using career note, but that won't be used anymore. And then, as I'm sure most of you are aware, we're shifting from a 13-week curriculum to a 12-week curriculum. We're not going to really touch on that in this workshop. That's, if you have questions about that, you can reach out to your BM or FM or HI, depending on your position. The only thing that I'm going to mention about that is that the C evals will change. So classroom evaluation dates will change. It's still going to be 3, 6, and 9, but the final round of C evaluations will be due in week 11. So that's just something to keep in mind. There's also one change with the tablets and how to access the dashboard. I have a screenshot of the teacher's tablet, so I'll show that later, but just keep that in mind. That's going to be one of the changes, but that's going to be for all SMART textbooks, not just the organic learning textbooks. So again, I'll mention that later, but just so you guys have an idea of some of the changes that are coming up for the spring term. Okay, so here again, for the perspective speech, we want to make sure they know how to write an effective script with a clear opinion, supported by logical reasons and personal experience. We cannot stress that enough. The component is literally called personalization. So it is really, really important that students are using personal experience. Obviously, if they need to, embellish a little or use something that's maybe not originally theirs, like their cousin's story or something, that's okay. But we just want them to understand that the details are going to be personal experiences, personalization. So very similar to how we conduct PPE. That's what we're going to be doing throughout the term. Additionally, it's how to give an effective speech. So even though we're doing the writing component in class, you need to make sure that your instructors know what are the speaking components that they're graded on. So if you're not familiar with Learning Portal and kind of seeing how the students are evaluated, some of the things are obviously their fluency. Do they take unnecessary pauses? Do they make eye contact with the camera? Are they using gestures? Are they using props or images? So all of that gets graded in addition to the content. So it's really important that you explain to students, like, yes, we are writing the script in class, but don't forget you have to present this when you get home. And then when they go home, they will still get the e-tutor feedback and evaluation and the evaluation there. They will also get a classroom evaluation. So this is being added to those C-evals. And part of their language skills will now include writing, and that will be based on how they are doing this part of the class. So it's specific to the perspective speech component. So it's really important. We're evaluating students on this. So instructors really need to make sure that they're putting a lot of effort into this component. Newscast. So let's quickly talk about the newscast. This is something that exists already. This is just kind of a minor update, but it's really, really, I think, going to help a lot of instructors, and then obviously going to help the students as well. In addition to the perspective speech, which is going to be a smart textbook, we are also adding the C2 newscast into the booster workbook. So this will be physically in their workbook, whereas perspective speech will be a smart textbook. So newscast, if you're familiar with the process right now, students log on to their learning portal. They listen to 2 different audios, and then they have to choose which side. They have to choose their stance. And then they basically just take notes and give a news report. Normally, one of those audios will coincide, or it will be the review lesson audio. Instead of doing that, what we're going to do is have students fill this out in class. So it's really, really important that instructors stress that the better they fill out this outline, the better they're going to do on their iLearning. And obviously that's really important. So we need to make sure that instructors are, incorporating this into the lesson. And again, treating this with the same diligence as they would just normally going through the listening sections. So for low levels, or like low mid-level, so Terra Bridge, they usually have understand and build. And then the par birdie levels have understand and contrast. So it's usually the second component is listening, but it doesn't matter. It's really just about whichever component is the listening component. For Terra Bridge Par Birdie, they're going to fill out this outline in their workbook when they do that listening page. And then obviously, this will help the students because they will have an outline to then go and do their newscast. They'll no longer need to select a stance. They will just use this specific stance. So the newscast audio and the newscast in the booster workbook, those will be directly related. This is for the organic learning. We have C2, EC4 through Giga, Terra Birdie, and then Terra Birdie for even weeks, and then Eagle through Alba Plus. You guys were given this on your in the email that invited you to the training, so this is all available. But we're going to go sort of based off of the timing in the segment guides because those are more specific. This is more of a visual, and it also lets you know where some of the time was cut. So I'll go into that as well, but we're going to break this down level by level. I just feel like that's the easiest way to sort of go through the information. Okay, so for EC4 through Giga, the flow of the organic learning is never going to change. It's always going to be activation and build up at home, which is choosing their stance and brainstorming. Then coming to class, doing personalization, which is script writing, and then going home and giving their personal speech, which is going to be their evaluation from the e-tutor and everything like that. That's where they're actually speaking it. So that does not change whether it's low, mid, or high. It's just the actual input and output will change, obviously based on the lessons, but also just the like how advanced the material is. So for the low, I'm just going to show the segment guide quickly so you guys can see. We have the first 15 minutes are admin. So obviously you do review tests, you do attendance, but then you're going to go right into this personalization. So that's why it's so important that everyone is aware of how to do this, because you're spending the first 35 minutes on this. Then as we approach the second hour, that's when you're going to introduce the topic for the day and, get into the C2 lesson. So it's really, really important that you guys follow this structure. That way we have enough time and we really dedicate it to the in-class writing. That's why it got pushed to the start of the lesson rather than keeping it at the end. It's also in here, it will show the objective and then obviously the methodology for going through the steps. So first I want to go over activation and build up, which is what they'll do at home. So here they're going to get introduced to the topic and organize ideas about the topic and then choose a stance and think of their own reasons. So activation is looking at the topic and arranging keywords. Build up is listening, choosing a stance, and thinking of reasons. So for activation, for low levels, they're just going to have an image and they'll sort of infer what the topic is going to be. And then they're going to drag and drop these different, essentially TRPs, topical related phrases, into the corresponding sides. So is it positive or is it negative, just based off of the image? Then they're going to listen to a short audio. This is the build-up page. They're going to listen to a short audio. For the low levels, this is really just going to be an MP3 prompt. Again, if they have to listen, if they have to do the dragging and dropping, hopefully, they'll be more inclined to just go through the process rather than trying to, just give an output at the end. So the ideas from the previous page will be carried over. And they can also write in their own reason. So right here at the bottom, you see, help me relax, make me laugh, learn new information, and then they can write in their own reason. Because they're EC4 through Giga, it's not super likely that they're going to write their own reasons. That's fine. It's just there as an option for them. Then they're going to brainstorm. So they need to choose either good or bad. Then they're going to brainstorm reasons and details. So the reason will carry over, but the detail is something they must create completely on their own. So on this page, you'll see, again, they're just going to choose it. It will carry over. Choose it. It will carry over. Then they're going to write their own detail. This is where, especially at the beginning, Mega or EC4 and Mega Giga, they're really not going to know how to personalize, most likely. So they might come up with the detail, and then when they get to class, you're going to have to workshop that. That's fine. This is really just getting them into the process. Another thing is just in general, not just for low, but especially for like students that are really new to this type of iLearning process, you need to continue to encourage students to complete these 2 steps at home. This works best if everybody is doing this at home. And on the screenshot later, I'll show you how to see if students are completing that. There's a way on the Smart Textbook for instructor to see who has completed the first 2 steps. So at the beginning, a lot of times students don't do their iLearning before class. So you just need to make sure that you're emphasizing that it's really important that this part of their iLearning they need to do before class. They don't have to do everything. Like they don't have to do their reading skill practice or, all of the other stuff, but it's like for this specific one, they need to do this. That also means in the C1 classes, you can have those instructors remind students as well. So if you do like C1 on day 1 and then C2 day 2, you can have your C1 instructors like reminding them, make sure you do those iLearning steps before you go to your C2 class this week, or if it's vice versa, then you can just have the C1 instructor say like over the weekend, make sure you do the C2. So I think it's good for all instructors to be encouraging this, not just C2 instructors. That way students are hearing it, they understand the importance, and they can really get into that routine after the first few weeks. Okay, so that's what they do at home. They've now gotten introduced to the topic. They know their opinion. They've kind of brainstormed one reason and one detail. And that's what they're going to do for low level. They just do their opinion, one reason, one detail. Then they're going to come to class. And again, this is personalization. So this is the part that's done in class. This is the part that's on the segment guide that will take 35 minutes. So for here, they're going to write out their entire script. So they're going to write out their script using full sentences. I know here on the screenshots, they're just like snippets, but what you're going to do is teach them how to form these into full cohesive sentences. I think we all have experience where students have these really great ideas, or they're really excited about something. And then when it gets onto the paper, it just really doesn't quite make sense, or it doesn't flow very naturally. So that's what we want to help them with. We really just want to help polish those skills. So again, lower levels, this is going to take a lot of effort because they're not used to writing in this format. That is also why they have less information to complete. So they only have the opening, and the body is just one reason and one detail. That's also all they're evaluated on. So if students want to go above and beyond and write like a second reason and a second detail, that's great. It's not going to help their e-tutor like evaluation. It might help their in-class evaluation if you feel like, oh, this student always does a great job. Then maybe that student gets an A on the C eval. But as far as like what they would actually be evaluated on for that assignment, it's not going to like give them extra points. But that's something, if you have students who are doing really well, like maybe that's where you can push them and challenge them just so that, they feel like they're growing their skills as well. There are also going to be students who don't do the first two steps. So before starting this, you obviously want to make sure that instructors understand the prompt, they confirm understanding with the students, and they just give like a really quick background run through of the information for those students who didn't complete it, and just to, review and reinforce with the students who did. And then that's when you're going to help them develop their script, write in the personal experiences. So you're going to need to be proctoring. You're going to need to be using the student response system on the tablets, and just really giving a lot of individual guidance, as well as obviously general guidance to the class. If you have a student who finishes, they did great, they're not really at the point where they would be, maybe adding extra like reasons or details, that's totally fine. The last step that they're going to do is add an image. There's a few things about this. This is secondary. Students should not be adding images until their script is completely finished and submitted. And that you've confirmed that they can add an image. So you need to make sure that that's a step that, they notify you first, because that is not the most important part. They can actually do that at home as well. So it's just not something that, they probably don't need as much guidance with finding a picture. But it is going to require you to unblock apps and allow them to go onto the internet to search for things. So just keep in mind the normal classroom rules for like classroom management and student management when students are doing projects. Obviously, you need to set the tone, set the rules from the beginning of the term. This can't be something where, you wait for something bad to happen and then address it. Just set the tone from the beginning of the term and proctor. Make sure that students aren't doing, anything crazy. One other thing that I think has been really helpful when teaching low levels, and I think for teaching high levels as well, is just helping students, if you get to this point where we're searching images, helping them research. because we do that anyway. What are some helpful terms that we can use when researching our topic? Same thing for their images for this. Go over like choosing keywords out of their answers or things like that. But again, the image is not the main focus here. It is there. So if students can get to it, that's great. But we are mainly focused on the actual content and the writing and the script building. So please make sure that that's the priority. In order for instructors to actually understand what the students do at home, there will be screenshots available. Well, they're not really screenshots. They're more just like guidance on what the students will do. And these will be available on FTP. This is for teacher use only. This is not for students. Obviously, this is for preparation. If students just see this every week, there's really no incentive for them to do the activation and build up at home because they know they can just come to class and get the same information. So please make sure that instructors know this is not to be shared with students. This is just for them to prepare. So for lesson 1, you'll see this is the image, and then the students will drag and drop. These will be the TRPs that they have, and then this is their prompt. Do you think computers are good or bad for our lives? So then instructors should know, obviously, how to guide students using what's been given to them already. They might also relate it to the lesson. Of course, these will be related to the lesson. For low, it's a little bit more general. Because with C2 mid, obviously they'll have studied the information the week before, or the topic beforehand. And then with C2 high, you're kind of focusing on a similar topic the entire term. For low, the questions are a little bit more general just because the students do like, a new lesson every week where there is an overarching theme, but the questions are general enough that even if they don't have background knowledge, they can answer the questions. So even if students don't do activate and build at home, or if they're doing it at home and they're not familiar with what the lesson material is going to be, they will be okay. It was designed in that way specifically for the low levels. And then something to keep in mind is that if they don't do activation and build up, they actually can go back after class and do it. But again, we want to encourage them to do it before class. That's how we're going to get the most out of it. But just so you are all aware, they actually can go back and complete that. They can go back in and add images. So it's not like if they don't do it, they'll never be able to do it. It's just that we prefer that they do it before class. It's the best way to conduct this component and get the most out of it. Okay, and then of course, again, at the end of this, just making sure that students understand how to give their speech, giving them those speaking pointers. Okay, then we're going to move into mid, and what you'll notice is that the process does not change. So again, we have before class activation and build up, during class personalization, after class presentation, they submit, evaluate, and then they can share to social learning. So again, the steps don't change. It's just the content that's going to change. So for mid, again, this is only on even weeks. That's really, really important that instructors remember that because they're going to be doing the newscast component on the odd weeks, okay? There is going to be more input and more output. So with low, they only have the image. For the mid-levels, they're going to listen to a conversation. And then this is how they're going to try and sort through the ideas. So there'll be a girl and a boy usually, and the girl will always agree with the prompt, and then the boy will always disagree. So just so you guys, have some background on that. Again, they're not given a written prompt, so they have to listen to the MP3 in order to know like which side is which. And then for the mid-levels, again, this will be available, and instructors will be able to see what the script was, what the TRPs were, what the prompt was. And that'll be available for the lessons. Okay, then once they listen to the conversation, same process, they're going to choose a stance. They're going to use the reason and the detail that's there, but they have to personalize this. So they can't say like the girl's cousin. They could change that to say my cousin. They can also change it to say my brother, my sister, my friend. That's okay. They can adapt that however they choose. The biggest thing is, again, just making sure that it's personalized. If they have their own personal experience, that is best. But if they just want to use this and adapt that, that's also fine. They can also change the reason altogether. That's okay. This is really just to guide them and help them. So if they have other ideas, that's completely fine, as long as it still supports the opinion. Then, instead of just doing reason 1 and detail 1, now that they're in the mid-levels, they're also going to do reason 2 and detail 2. So again, the content is a little bit more advanced, and you know, they're going to have to do more steps because they're in a higher level. So again, they come up with their own reason, they come up with their own personal experience for detail 2. So just continue to encourage students to do this, and you know, help them really understand personalization. Throughout the term, we should see improvements in how this is done. And then by the time they get to PPE, hopefully they really understand it, and that should make PPE writing a lot easier as well, because I know we are doing that practice now, and we see a lot of students struggle with that aspect of personalizing. So hopefully, if we can build this skill throughout the term, they'll also have an easier time when it comes to that essay. Okay, so there are 2 different segment guides for C2 Mid. There's Tara Bridge, and then there's Par Birdie. So obviously, you know, instructors need to make sure that they're following the correct segment guide. Again, you have Build and Understand for the Tara Bridge levels, and then for Par Birdie, you're going to have Understand and Contrast. So that's a big difference. But what you'll notice is at the very beginning, this is down here for the even lessons, you're going to have the perspective speech component. So that's 35 minutes here, 35 minutes here. Then for the Tara Bridge, same thing. And then, like I said earlier, for low and high, it's going to be every week. Same as before, you'll also have the methodology. And then you're also going to have, at the very end, there will be, this is the methodology, there will be the C evaluations. And that shows for language skills, clear and logical opening body sections of perspective speech with relevant personal experiences. And then it also mentions here the date changes, so 3, 6, 9, and 11. So again, just making sure that these are updated, that they're accessible for your instructors, and that you are, you know, just reiterating that information for them. Okay, then we move on to high. Again, the PDF here shows just phrases. Please make sure this is full script writing. So that's what they need to be doing in class, not just keywords. They need to be writing out full sentences, and then same thing, content first and images after. Okay, for Eagle through Alba Plus, process does not change. Before, during, and after class, they're going to do activation build up first, personalization during, and then presentation evaluation, and if they choose social learning after. So a few things with the high level. For their listening, obviously there's no image, there's no conversation, and there's no TRPs. So they have to listen to a newscast or like a news report. Then they have to take notes and use that to then do their build up. So the activation portion is actually something that they have to fully listen to and take notes on. It will be related to the lesson, so it should help students understand the concepts as well. For instructors, the guide will have both sides, the prompt, and then of course the newscast. So instructors will need to do this. They'll also need to prepare some like key phrases that they think are important. Again, these are for instructors to prepare, so make sure that they're using those accordingly. Then once they have their notes, they can go ahead and start filling in their brainstorming. So they have their opinion, reason 1, detail 1, reason 2, detail 2, but nothing is being given to them the same way that it was in the mid and low level. So they have to really take their notes and then formulate it off of that and add in their own reasons and details with personal experience. There's also guiding questions at each level that will sort of help them formulate the details. So it's really just like probing questions. You know, how could it make your life better? How could it make your life worse? Pretty simple, but just to get students to understand what needs to go where. And then during class, they will do their personalization. So again, they're going to listen to the prompt. Instructors can play this prompt out loud. You just have to click the image or like tap the image and the audio will play. So just in case instructors are not sure how to do that, it's like embedded in the image so they can just play it. And then again, going over both sides, helping students really build this. The other attachment that you were given in the training email is an instructor guide. So I want to go over that really quickly. This is advanced guidance. This is going to be once your students actually understand the structure and can actually like come up with their own personal reasons and things like that. This is not something that should be used straight from the beginning. This is going to be like once the actual structure and the process has been understood and solidified, then instructors can start building on these skills. So for example, creating stronger hooks, previewing main points, giving these probing questions, like things to think about. This is going to be more helpful probably for the high levels because they have more experience with writing. It can obviously be used for low and mid, but it might be introduced a little bit sooner in the high levels just because they have a little bit more experience with writing, especially at ALBA and ALBA Plus. So, but here you have some guiding questions for personal experience and things like that, that this is helpful if instructors read this over. They might not use it fully during the class, but it is a resource. So make sure that this is available for your instructors as well. Okay. And then again, just for the high levels, they're going to have more content. They're being evaluated on their opening, their body 1, body 2, and their closing. So a little bit more than the mid levels. Then just a few things to go over quickly. The organic learning smart textbook will be vertical for the students. It's going to be horizontal for instructors because we have to use SRS, but it will be vertical for the students. So they'll turn their tablet and then that way they can see everything. It'll just make typing a little bit easier. They don't have to worry about like flipping through back and forth to pages, things like that. And then this shows the breakdown of what's expected for each level. So for low levels, just the opening and body 1. For mid, opening, body 1, body 2. And then for high, all the way through closing. And again, this is going to be a separate smart textbook. So right now we have like textbook, review test, semi-book, and then there's going to be a separate category called organic learning, and you'll be able to download this from there on the bookshelf. It will not be available on Teachers Portal. It's similar to review test in that way. It's something you're going to send to the students and then have like, obviously you'll have access as well. And then it's something that you have to, this is so important, you have to submit the data before closing out the textbook. So there's going to be a pop-up for instructors that will say, you know, something like, you're closing the textbook, like, do you want to share all data or something like that? There's really not going to be an option to say no. So you have to make sure that you upload all of the data the same way that you would upload vocabulary scores, review test scores. So please, please, please make sure that instructors know that. And they also know like what to do if there's ever like a glitch with the internet or something like that. So either going back in and resubmitting or going through the history and uploading that log. So please make sure that, again, if you're not familiar with that, you get familiar with that, and then that way you can help your instructors. There's also a change with C2 High. There's no more research page and there's no more perspective exploration. So those two pages have, those components have been cut entirely out of the Smart Textbook and the segment guide. So they're replacing this with Reading Navigator. Reading Navigator is now iLearning. It's supposed to be a simple and light iLearning activity that's done before class. So again, you need to make sure that students are doing this, and it should only take about like maybe 10 minutes. It's going to cover the lessons reading, so the specific reading pages assigned for that week. It's going to give a visual organizer with a list of key sentences. And it's going to provide 3 to 5 comprehension questions about an important concept. So the organizer is going to be based on all of the reading pages, but the 3 to 5 comprehension questions will sort of hone in on one specific concept. And those comprehension questions are actually going to be tied to the project usually. So whatever the designated project is and like that concept that they're focusing on, those comprehension questions will be related to that. So again, hopefully students have a better understanding when they come to the class. Why do we need to do this? Obviously, if students have read, this is going to help reinforce their understanding. They're going to just, you know, really nail down all of those concepts and make sure that they're super prepped for class. Unfortunately, not all students do the reading for high levels, especially because it's nonfiction. So what ends up happening is we spent a lot of time in class explaining what happened in the books, going over a summary of what happened. You know, we end up using a lot of teacher talk more than leaning towards that 25-75. We just end up doing a lot of the work in class rather than focusing on the actual concepts and applying that through project. So this is going to help students who don't do the reading assignments. And like I said, the activation and build up audios will also be related to the concepts. So if they're doing that and the reading navigator, obviously it's ideal if they're reading. Do not go into class and say like, you don't need to do the reading as long as you do these things. But this needs to be the bare minimum that they're doing in order to participate and get the most out of the class. So that will help us free up more time in the actual classroom learning because we don't have to spend as much time covering the actual content. We can focus more on the concept and the application of those concepts through project. So students still need to be very selective about, or teachers still need to be selective about which concepts to cover. So for example, those concept and context pages, there's going to be, like if there's 4 of them, but they need to cover it in 20 minutes, they might not be able to do that. So they either need to select specific questions from each page or select specific pages and maybe not cover one page. So instructors really need to be familiar with that and then select what they feel is, you know, most helpful for the students. And then obviously encourage students to complete the reading navigator, especially to those who never do the reading assignment. Again, we don't want to tell them like, you don't have to do the reading. That's, you know, not beneficial, but we want to emphasize that this is going to be a way that they can really understand what's going on. And it's going to help them, you know, understand the class better, get through the material quicker, and therefore spend more time on projects. So, you know, always use that as an incentive as well. again, we just really want to be encouraging rather than trying to give like punishments or anything like that. Students typically respond better to, encouragement and positive reinforcement rather than, just kind of yelling at them. So hopefully by building in these different steps and these components, we will have a more positive learning environment and students will really be benefiting from each step. For the reading navigator, this is the zoom out. So zoom out will be a section where there's an outline of the story, and then they will drag and drop, sorry, not of the story, but of the specific reading pages. They'll drag and drop words to complete the key sentences, and then at the end, it will show an organizer with those sentences. And then zoom in is going to be comprehension questions, again, about that one specific concept. So for the reading navigator, this is what one of the like drop downs would look like. So when they're dragging and dropping, they would have something like this. And then when they finish the outline, it will look like this. So these screenshots are just an example. This one is from Chew on This. So it sort of shows the key concepts of what they'll be focusing on for that reading. Then for the SRS, so I want to go over this really quickly as well. This is what the instructor tablet is going to look like. So this is from a mid-level perspective speech page. A few things to take note of. So what I mentioned earlier is that the way that we access the dashboard is going to be different, and that's going to be for all SMART textbooks, not just perspective speech, not just C2 classes. So right now, we have to swipe up and then long hold the back button, but instead we're going to this would normally be like where the quick navigation is, where it has all the pages. So we're going to long hold that, and then that will open up the dashboard, which is going to be like pick one function, timer function, your pen functions, things like that. So make sure that for all instructors, and you let instructors know that's going to roll out spring term for all SMART textbooks. So just so that they're aware. It won't be these 6 dots. It will be like the pages where you can click and then all of the pages show up, that quick navigator. So make sure instructors know that. Okay, so the other thing on this is solely for perspective speech. On the SRS, so this is obviously you would have to click the arrows and this part will show up similar to anytime we're using student response system. There's a few things. So first, the reminder is that this is a separate textbook. They're not going to open the C2 lesson. They're going to download a SMART textbook from the organic learning section, which will be a new section instead of just semi-book, review test, and textbook. Over here, so this little book with the pen, if it's gray, that means that the student did not complete the first 2 steps of the iLearning. So they didn't do activation and they didn't do build up. Now, if you see a ton of students not doing this, it's probably because they either don't know that they're supposed to, or they just forgot, or they're not used to doing it. So again, we want to make sure that as many of these as possible are not gray when beginning the personalization. Additionally, if a lot of these are gray, you might need to spend an extra minute going over the topic. We do not want to dedicate a lot of time to brainstorming and doing those first 2 steps in class. Again, it's just going to set the wrong idea that, oh, okay, well, I don't need to do it at home. I could just do it in class. However, there are going to be some students who don't enroll in iLearning for whatever reasons. We don't know what goes on with students' families or their home situations. Like, it could be a financial thing. We don't ever want to make students feel bad for not enrolling in iLearning. Instead, we do want to encourage it. We want to maybe praise students who have done it, things like that. But please don't try to like single out students who haven't done it, especially if they're just not enrolled. If it's, a student who just consistently, they have iLearning and they're just not doing it, you can have a conversation with them about it. But again, generally, we want to keep it very positive and encouraging, so that students just feel more confident going into this part of the class. The next part is the check mark. So right now they're all gray, and that's because all of these text boxes are blank. These text boxes. So if a student starts to type, this will turn black. Then on the student tab, there will be a little submit button. And when they submit, this will turn orange. So that means like they're totally done. They've submitted it. This is, they're ready to be checked. So again, you want to make sure that you're paying attention. If a student is on gray, but they've been working on it for 5 minutes, obviously you probably need to check in on that student, make sure that they understand what they need to do. And then as always, if you click the student's name, you will be able to see what is on their page. But if you're going to be casting this to the screen, utilize that lock function if you don't want other students to see what each other are writing. So just make sure, again, that instructors are familiar with the tablet functions, the SRS, they really know what they want to do before just like messing around, showing everybody's work to each other, things like that. When I go to exit this on my tablet, again, there will be an option to upload the data. You have to select that, upload all of the data, and then that way you can exit. And then you would open the Smart Textbook for the C2 lesson and begin the topic connect. And then I know I've said this multiple times, but again, just make sure that instructors understand they are going to be doing a writing focus in class, but they have to make sure that they're helping students understand the speaking part of it, and going over like, okay, so for this speech, like, how are you going to deliver this? Things like that. I believe that's everything. So before we open it up for questions, I am going to send everyone the survey, and then we'll move on. And if anyone has any questions, we can go ahead and answer those. I'm going to send this in the chat, so please make sure that you check that. And again, you have to fill this out before heading out today. And it's just really quick. It's just like 5 questions.